at warmup.itcsforall.com and just share some of your thoughts as we can see some more people are coming in. We'll give them a minute to get in and share your thoughts on some features that you think really make strong presentations. And we'll hop over there in just a minute. Great, I can see some coming in already. And this is one of the things that we really like to do is have some type of warm-up activity, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but just something to engage participants while they're coming in from the waiting room so that you don't waste a second. These sessions of 30 minutes are a challenge to try and really make them engaging and fit everything in. So by having something that the participants can do as soon as they come in, they feel like their time is valued and we're really maximizing every moment of that presentation time. So I can see, I'm gonna go ahead and pull the Padlet up so that you all can see that. Okay, so definitely engaging. I think that's on the top of the list, engaging, interactive, ones that tell a story. That's absolutely right. I think those stories, we sometimes think, well, how can I fit in a story? But that's what really sticks with people, are those stories that they can really relate to. I think that's great. I see a lot of engaging. So we'll do our best to engage you today. Get you up and moving first thing in the morning. Energy, I like that. Definitely at 8 a.m. we need some energy. And I love that one that says immediately applicable. So finding something, yes, that you can start using immediately, that one good takeaway. Hopefully we'll give you more than one today, but we hope that you find that one good takeaway that you can use. Okay, so since we are limited to 30 minutes, I'm gonna hop away from the Padlet. If you didn't have a chance, the thing about these warm-up activities, if you just came in and you say, I didn't have a chance to add to the Padlet, no worries. This is not something that was critical, just something for us to engage you from the start. I like that little thinker there. We also do wanna direct your attention. We put this in the sketch, but we do have a wakelet of resources that we'll share out at the end. I'm sure Biz will put that in the chat as well. It's present.itcsforall.com. So that's for you to refer to kind of after the session. We have all of the resources that we'll be sharing in our presentation, but then also some other articles and podcasts for you to kind of explore if there are certain aspects of this presentation that really speak to you. But we're going to do the primary bulk of our presentation through Nearpod today. So if you want to have, we'll kind of be jumping back and forth. So if you have dual monitors, that's awesome. Or if you want to split your screen and we're going to join the Nearpod, I will put the link in the chat. Or if you want to go to join.nearpod.com and enter the code, you're welcome to do that as well. And I just did put the link in the chat for the Nearpod today. And Biz put the join.nearpod.com, which if you want to enter the code KA2YT, you can join us there.
You should just click Nisha's link though. That one's better.
If you click my link, it'll take you right in. How many of you have used Nearpod? Give me a little thumbs up in the chat if you have used Nearpod. Okay, great. We love Nearpod for those, if you're talking about that engagement and that interactivity. The great thing about Nearpod is it has so many embedded activities that really do engage your students and engage your audience. Yes, love those thumbs up for Nearpod. Okay, I see I never used it before in the chat, so that's awesome. Shannon and anyone else who has never used Nearpod, it is a paid subscription. You do have to subscribe to it, or your school or district has to subscribe to it, but it is well worth it. And you as a teacher, if your school or district does not subscribe to it, you can elect to pay for it, but I would say it's well worth the subscription cost. Especially in this virtual learning, it really helps to engage the students.
I would jump in and say that if you are a Pear Deck user, it's very comparable. So if you're near to Nearpod but old to Pear Deck, I think you'll find it's very similar features.
Okay, Biz, you think we have most people in? We can go ahead and get started?
Let's do it.
Okay. So we're going to start out with a poll just for us to be able to gauge who is with us today. You'll notice you have a little countdown and you have 30 seconds. It's an easy, quick poll. One question. And I can see those responses coming in. That's great. The code, I'll put the code in the chat. There's the Nearpod code for anyone trying to join.
You can also see it in the upper left-hand corner of the screen.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share out these results. Again, if you didn't have a chance to participate, that's okay. This is really for me and Biz so that we can see who are we talking to today. And we see that about half of you are ITCs, instructional technology coaches, which is awesome. We are instructional technology coaches, so we love seeing fellow coaches here with us today. We also have some other, which is interesting. So that might be maybe you are counselors, librarians, fit into one of those other. We have some teachers today, and teachers, we really appreciate you being here. We know you have so much on your plates that you're juggling. So you taking the time to, enrich your own self and grow during this time of virtual learning and time of the pandemic is awesome. And then some administrators. So we have a little mix of everybody here today, which is awesome. We'll try and cater some of what we're sharing in our stories to fit your particular roles. So in terms of presenting like a pro, obviously a lot of your success is going to come from your advanced preparation and organizing your presentation. So we have some tips that we hope will make you successful. Number one, which we did today, we started with music to kind of set the tone. That makes it a little less sterile environment. If you're coming into the waiting room and you're just sitting in a quiet room, even if there's something up on the screen, it can be a little bit like, so we hope that by sharing that music, it kind of got you energized at 8 a.m. this morning and kind of made you feel a little more engaged right from the start. We did put in the Wakelet some information on using royalty-free music, so definitely check that out, especially if you are presenting at a conference or in a situation like this. We also recommend having some type of waiting room activity. Now, we use Padlet today, and we love Padlet. That's a great resource to use really for any type of formative assessment in your presentation. But it doesn't just have to be something that they're contributing to. My own kids, their art teacher always puts up when they come into the waiting room for art, what materials they'll need for the day. Will they need Sharpies? Will they need colored pencils? What type of paper do they need? How many pieces of paper? And I love that because then when her class actually starts, all her kids are ready to learn. And she doesn't have to worry about, oh, I forgot this material and I have to run and get this material. A lot of students or a lot of teachers will use some type of warm-up activity. So just as you did when we were live and had kids coming into the classroom, when you're presenting virtually, that warm-up activity is still critical for kind of setting the tone and having that consistency in your presentation. Even just having an agenda slide so that your participants know, okay, what are the activities? What are my objectives today that I'm going to be learning? Maybe you just pose a question. So any of those activities, but something that, especially for those really conscientious people that got to your presentation early, they have something to be engaged and they feel like their time is valued and every moment of their presentation and their time with you is really actively spent learning. If possible, and we know this isn't always possible, but if possible, if you can have a co-host. I love that Biz is here with me because I know she's monitoring the chat. The VSTE members who are also here are, letting people in from the waiting room. So all of my energy and focus can really be on the presentation. And that's so key for me to keep me on track and keep me engaged with the audience. It's also really nice if you have somebody who's presenting with you just to feed off each other. It's more fun to have somebody to present with that you can kind of share those stories and share those responsibilities. If you are a teacher and you're saying, well, I'm all alone in my classroom, I don't have a co-teacher, I have no one to co-host with me. Think about a student at this point in the year. You probably can identify a really conscientious, responsible student who might really relish that role of acting as your co-host. I have elementary school students, and every once in a while their teacher will make them co-host. It's like they've won the lottery. Like it's the best thing in the world that they can be in that co-host role. And they are really responsible with it and they take it very seriously, but they help their teacher. Oh, you forgot that there's this question in the chat. Or sometimes the really wonderful part about having that chat available is that, sometimes they answer their own questions in that chat. And then the last thing that we'd really recommend is using that polling, just like we polled our audience to see who is here, using that polling to get a baseline so that you can cater your presentation right from the start to your audience. That's especially important in a situation like this where we don't know any of you, and we don't know who's coming in from that waiting room. But even if you're with your own class, using that baseline polling to gauge and see, okay, what is their prior knowledge? How quickly can I move through this material? Do they already have some understanding of this content is really, really critical. Some other things to keep in mind as you're preparing for success, we just talked about the chat. So using Zoom in this virtual setting, we have that back channel kind of already there for us. But even when we go back to live learning, and we're all excited to get back to that live learning and live presentations, using that back channel really does help you as a presenter to maintain your focus and flow. So that, again, I can focus just on what I'm presenting. Then when there's a natural pause in the presentation, I can go and address those questions. It's also really nice when there's some side conversations happening. Really appropriate side conversations sometimes happen in the chat to kind of extend that conversation further. Sometimes participants will answer each other's questions, they'll share additional resources, and that just enriches your presentation. When you're thinking about your presentation, when Biz and I sat down and we kind of just threw out, like, what are all the ideas we have for what makes a great presentation, and what are the keys to presenting like a pro? We just threw them out on paper, and then we kind of said, okay, well, these kind of fit together, or we really want to make sure we prioritize these ideas. And doing that, chunking your time, helps to kind of organize your thoughts and classify those things that fit together most appropriately. It's also great that you can do that because you prioritize what is most important. Again, 30 minutes, I'm like watching my clock already, is going to go by really quickly. So if we don't get to some of the things at the end, you have those resources in the Wakelet, but we're making sure that we prioritize the most important information. And then in terms of providing resources, we often share our slides from a presentation, which is great. That's kind of the go-to, but it's not just about the slides, right? We also should be sharing additional resources. So for us in our Wakelet, we added some additional websites or some podcasts, some things that we thought, if you're interested in this topic, you want to dive a little bit deeper than we have time to in 30 minutes, you'll have those resources. When you do provide resources to your audience, we highly recommend you use some type of branding to match your presentation, so that you can see our slides, the graphics in our slides also match the graphics in our Wakelet, just for some type of consistency and professionalism. And then we recommend the use of subdomains. So you've probably typed in bit.ly a lot. You won't be typing in bit.ly here. Not that there's anything wrong with bit.ly. We all love bit.ly, but we're using the ITCs for all subdomain. And we hope that you might see that subdomain in other presentations at VSTE, and you kind of tie us all together that we're from Prince William County. We also hope that maybe you'll go out and then follow ITCs for All on Twitter, or check out some resources that are on the ITCs for All YouTube page, so that you kind of have that memorable experience of knowing that that group is cohesive. Biz, I should have asked at the last slide. Do you want to add anything to that?
No, I feel like you said it all.
I'm speeding through here. I shouldn't be speeding through, but I know we're already halfway to our time. So I'm going to hand it over to you to talk a little bit about imposter syndrome.
All right. There's a couple of questions that just popped up in the chat, including one asking for the slides. And we're not going to share the slides, but Nisha, if you don't mind sharing the Wakelet resources in the chat as I start talking about something that is near and dear and personal to my heart, which is imposter syndrome. If you are considering giving a presentation, not just a normal classroom lesson, but presenting to a group of people, this is something that you may struggle with. And dealing with that is really an important thing when you are getting ready for a presentation. Imposter syndrome, if you're not familiar with it, is that general feeling that if you know something, of course everyone else knows it, and there's probably somebody who's way better at it than you. I think that's actually kind of the origin story of the presentation we're giving now. This started with me listening to a podcast about imposter syndrome and asking myself, what is it that I think I'm actually kind of good at, but that I would never present on because I think everyone's great at it. And like talked to Nisha about it, and I said, hey, I think we should maybe give this a shot at VSTE this year. Imposter syndrome is tough. It can make you feel fear, stress, anxiety, insecurity, all of those things. And I think at some point in this preparation process, we experienced every single one of those, maybe multiple times. But there is something that you can do about imposter syndrome if it's something that you struggle with. And the first step is saying, like, this is imposter syndrome. I'm not actually terrible at everything. And I know a lot of things that other people don't, or that maybe other people need to hear said to them in a different way. And if you're not good at giving yourself that pep talk, I think it's great to tell somebody else that you're feeling it, because other people can see how much you know and the talents that you have and tell you that. Nisha and I definitely told each other, okay, I'm feeling imposter syndrome about this part of it right now. And we tried to encourage each other as we prepared for this. The other thing you can do to be proactive about imposter syndrome is to go ahead and take risks. And so, for example, if you have never presented at a conference before, then I would challenge you to think about, okay, what is it that I think I'm pretty good at, and could I maybe talk about that at VSTE next year? And even if that's terrifying for you, the more you do it, the easier it gets. And know also that no matter how much you deal with it, and the more you try to face it, it gets easier. But you will always probably, if you're like me, experience it a little bit. So just be patient and try to keep working through it.
Yeah, I would also say something that I always keep in mind, because I feel like if I'm presenting, I have to be like the expert, know it all, share something really revolutionary. But I think when people come to a presentation as an attendee, they really just want to have that one good takeaway. And somebody mentioned that on the Padlet. And I think if you think as a presenter, if I think from an attendee's perspective, I just really need to have that one good takeaway. Maybe for you, it's this imposter syndrome. And if you don't feel like you could present at VSTE at that level, maybe just present back at your school. Maybe present just in your CLT, whatever your comfort level is, just to stretch that little bit. Because like Biz said, the more you do it, the more comfortable it will feel.
And in the chat, Karen said, VSTE does have smaller events, and you can even think about the GRA ETC conference. They extended their call for proposals to January. So you might think about that, okay?
Okay, so go ahead. You should have on your screen with the Nearpod a little short answer question on what steps you would take to conquer imposter syndrome.
Do you want to hide student names, Nisha?
Oh, yes, thank you. We had talked about that. I forgot. A good reason to have a co-presenter to catch those things. Okay, so I see a couple. We're not going to spend too long, but reach out to colleagues for help, I think, is a great answer. We have meditation. Yeah, so I definitely took some deep breaths before we jumped on here today.
We also talked about the fact that neither one of us poured a cup of coffee this morning because we felt like we had enough nerves going on.
Yes. I love the one that someone said, prepare, and practice. That helps with imposter syndrome. Absolutely. And that's a good lead in to some of the things we'll be talking about later. Yeah, absolutely. So these are all great suggestions. Having a plan, reaching out for help. Tell each other that we rock. That is so important. Even more important in these times, right? Where everything is new to us. I feel like we're all learning and stretching every single day. All right, so to keep it rolling, we're down to about 10 minutes. So I'm going to keep it rolling here. Sorry.
Yeah. So tying in with what you said, practice is also, like, I think the main key to not just conquering imposter syndrome, but doing a good job. I have heard that there is something called the 60-40 rule that says you should spend about 40% of your time preparing slides and resources and 60% practicing, which is, I think, really wild. But I have also heard that the more you practice, the better you are. And that's not just a rumor, it seems to be true. Specifically, the magic number for practicing a presentation is around 6 practices, which sounds like a lot. And a lot of people say, well, I'm actually better speaking off the cuff, and I do a better job just being myself. Otherwise, I sound over rehearsed. And that can be true. Once you've practiced 2 or 3 times, you can start to sound a little bit monotonous and drone-like. But if you kind of push through that wall into practices 4, 5, and 6, you can start to sound more natural. You get more of that I'm me, I'm myself flow back, but without all of the anxiousness and verbal fillers that sometimes come along with your first run through. Another important thing is body language. Is obviously really different on Zoom than it is when you're in person. On Zoom, Honestly, I usually try to keep my hands out of the screen because I think they can be a little bit distracting. I often secretly have a stress ball underneath my desk that I'm squeezing away at to kind of deal with my nervous energy. But if you are in person and you don't have the luxury of only presenting from about the neck up, it is important to use your body language to try to maintain energy in the room. And so bigger upward motions can help build that positive energy happening there. You guys already mentioned the fact that storytelling is a big deal. So being able to tie things back to your own experiences in life makes you a little bit more relatable. And so I think that's also something we see in the classroom too. So for example, I have all year with a group of students to build those relationships and get to know them. But with you, we have 30 minutes. So just even a little bit of a story or sharing a little bit about ourselves helps us build that relationship with you. And maybe that makes you a little more interested in what we're saying in general. And as we said, practice, practice, practice is a huge part of it. And two great tools that we can recommend for that are Microsoft's PowerPoint Coach. So if you are in a Microsoft district or you use Microsoft in your personal life, PowerPoint Online has an amazing tool called Coach. And what it does is it allows you to practice going through your slides and you speak out loud to your computer. And the computer listens to you. And when you're done, it gives you this feedback that tells you if you were just reading your slides too much, or if you talked for too long, or if you were even using problematic language that might be offensive to some people in ways that you didn't know. And it gives you some tips to improve for your next round of practice. Another tool, if you are not a Microsoftie, is an app that you can download to your phone called Like So, which does a very similar thing. And that's just a couple of dollars from the App Store.
Yeah, and I would say with some of these that we're sharing, obviously they are for you as the educator, but also be sure to share some of these tips with your students. We know we've all sat through, if we've been in education for any length of time, some really awful presentations by students. So even at the elementary age, my fourth grader is using PowerPoint Coach, and she'll say, "Oh, Mom, it reminds me not to just read my slides," or "It told me I said too many times." So it's giving her those lifelong lessons that are going to be valuable to her forever, and starting her out at a very young age, working on her presentation skills. So keep in mind that these are things that you can really impart upon your students as well.
And I also just saw that Katie put in the chat, if you're not watching the chat, that Flipgrid has a coach coming out too, which is awesome because I do think it's an amazing tool. And our kids may not all be using PowerPoint, but I think we all put them on Flipgrid.
Yeah, that's awesome. I did not even know about that. So that's why the chat is so great. Sometimes our attendees have those resources they can share that even we as presenters don't know about. So thanks so much, Katie. Oops, skipped one, sorry. So some tools of the trade, just some things that we think might be useful to you. We love Canva. We created these slides using Canva, and we love Canva so much just because there is just a wealth of templates available for you to use. They have range from very whimsical that, you look at that and you say, oh, that'd be perfect for a pre-K classroom, all the way up to secondary ones that you can use for professional development that really look quite professional. And it looks like you've spent time designing graphics when really Canva has done it all for you. So if you haven't yet signed up for Canva's education account, I'll throw that in the chat right now. But it's totally free for educators. And like I said, check out, if you search education templates, there's just so much there. Definitely something that you can use in your classroom or in your own practice. If for some reason Canva doesn't meet your needs, there's a multitude of other resources, Slides Carnival, Slides Mania, Slides Go. If you have been using the same old Google Slides templates or PowerPoint templates when creating your presentations, definitely check some of those out. They have seasonal themes that change all the time. So it's always worth going back and refreshing and looking at what's new and different and available to you. Prezi recently came out with a new feature called Prezi Video that's really great. It enables you to not just share the text and photos, but also your face so that you can interact with your audience. So that's another great tool that we would recommend if you haven't explored, that you do so. We've talked a little bit about formative assessment, not just for keeping your audience engaged, but also so that you can kind of get a sense of, is your audience keeping up with you? Is there anything I need to go back and review if I'm working with students? Some different features that we would recommend: Zoom polling. We prefer Zoom polling when we're in the classroom just because the kids are already in Zoom, so we can easily throw out a poll to them. Mentimeter, I saw somebody put in the chat, I love Mentimeter. And Mentimeter is fun because it allows you to do polling, but give it a different graphical view. So we'll do a Mentimeter here in a second. That's a word cloud, just so you get a sense of that. And then poll everywhere is another option. In terms of engagement, Padlet, we've already mentioned Padlet as something that we love for engagement, not just as a warm-up or waiting room activity, but you could do that as a formative assessment throughout, or even as an exit ticket at the end. We're using Nearpod today, and for those of you that are new to Nearpod, hopefully you can see why we love it so much. There's so many great embedded interactive activities within Nearpod. It allows you to easily throw in a poll or a game or an interactive question. They even have some VR resources. So definitely check out Nearpod if you subscribe to that, if your school pays for that. If not, Pear Deck is another option that has many of the similar features. And then just using some of the Zoom tools. So asking the participants to use their nonverbal feedback or use their reactions. You may also notice as I'm sharing my screen, you don't see like my tabs up at the top or my Chrome extensions. You don't see my bookmarks. And that's because I'm using that feature of share only a portion of your screen. Has anybody used that yet? It's relatively new. Just looking in the chat for a second. But if you haven't used that feature, when you go to share your screen in Zoom, it is under the advanced tab. So it's a little bit hidden, but you can share just a portion of your screen, which I love because it focuses the attention of your attendees and kind of hides all of that extraneous stuff. If you're working with students, it's even better. A lot of us as presenters or as educators, we maybe have 2 monitors, we have large monitors, so we sometimes forget that our students might be working off of much smaller devices. So being able to share a portion of your screen, and we can kind of move that around as the lesson or as your presentation proceeds, is really nice for keeping that engagement for students. Yeah, and some people, I am referring to Zoom, you're right, but not everybody is using Zoom, but that is a feature for those of you that are Zoomers.
Nisha, we only have 2 minutes left, so let's go ahead and skip the Mentimeter.
Okay. We're going to skip that, but check out Mentimeter. It's a cool, it puts everything in a word cloud just like that. Okay, but yes, skip over. Go ahead, Viz.
Sorry, guys.
Takeaways.
So we want to give you some takeaways and talk about giving takeaways in a presentation. So we think there's 3 main ways to Karen, you're in my head because I just said so and caught myself on it. Verbal fillers are really tough, and practice is the solution for that. No substitute for it. 3 great ways to give takeaways. First, give a call to action or a challenge. For example, we've already challenged you, but want to reiterate it. Think about how you can beat imposter syndrome. Where can you challenge yourself to go present, whether it's to a small group or a larger group like this one. Also, recap your main points. We want to remind you that compiling resources that are more robust than slides is great. Trying out something new is important to mix up your slides. Practice, 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 and do as much as you can to assess and engage your audience. And then the last thing that we think is super valuable and really important for dealing with imposter syndrome, but also for growing as an educator, is to ask your participants what they know that you may not already know. We've heard some great feedback in the chat, and we want to end by giving you the option to share anything else that we may have missed. So we'd love for you to tell us, what did we miss? What else do you do that makes an incredible presentation? And go ahead and add that right onto this Collaborate board here in Nearpod. And as you do that, I'm just going to answer this question that just popped up in the chat from Courtney. She says that she didn't know you can make slides in Canva. So yeah, it's fantastic. When you look at the different templates, you can start by looking in education templates and find some there, but you can also just search presentations. And there are tons of great presentations here in Canva. You can download them as individual images, but they also have a presentation tool. So personally, I like to use the Canva app on my Mac, and directly from there, I can present. And much like PowerPoint or Google Slides, it gives you that presenter view, so you can kind of navigate through at the same time as there's another screen for attendees to see. In this case, we just copied the slides into a Nearpod. as Nisha, you downloaded them as JPEGs, right?
Yeah, or pings, I can't remember which. But yeah, and these are some great, I love seeing all these suggestions. Really, really good suggestions. Jamboard, I actually had that on my notes to mention Jamboard and I didn't, so that's great that this is in here. I like the giveaway door prizes. We wish we could give you guys some door prizes.
Or stickers.
We've had
Dress
some
up, and that's absolutely true. When you know, like I dressed up a little today, put on a little bit of makeup, it makes you feel better about yourself, even 8 a.m. in the morning, to kind of have that professional look, even if you can only see me really from the neck up.
Okay, guys, we are at 8:30. If you want to continue this conversation, you can go to, Gina, help me out here. I'm going brain dead.
You can go to Discord, you know, and Mary, were you going to drop it in the chat?
No, I don't have it ready to go. So, but Discord's an app you can download for free. This conversation can be continued at Discord with the into the room that you're in right now. All the rooms have their own chat rooms. So, okay, thank you guys. And we're gonna stop the recording here.
Thanks everyone so much for coming. We
Yeah, thank you.
appreciate you spending an early Friday